wrote 2 articles last week, I guess on Thursday and Friday. I mean, I came up with some of the ideas. Paul did most of the work at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com, and I've had them reposted together to the front page of Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com, and I'm going to retweet them out as well at Real Alex Jones, because anybody disagreeing with you, saying there's no such thing as a conspiracy theory, there's no such thing as government or big groups doing bad things, that's just asinine. We know historically over and over again that powerful combines, organized crime, you name it, get into corporations or government. It could be small town boss hog type stuff. It could be the gang, the Nazi mafia taking over Germany, the communist mafia taking over Russia. We know this happens all the time. We know what tyranny is. But back in the 60s, and Paul Watson's written about this, the CIA came out, this was declassified a few years ago, and said, hey, anybody criticizes any corruption, we just call them conspiracy theorists, and we tell the mainstream media, state-run media, to make fun of them. Sure, there's a lot of kooky stuff out there as well, but just questioning is an American or pro-liberty value. It's not bad to question. And so the article, again, came out Thursday, 10 conspiracy theories that came true. And then the second article on Friday, 10 more conspiracy theories that came true, from a fascist coup d'etat to the FBI poisoning alcohol. There's a lot of them, 20 of them. But what's really neat to read is the comments, thousands of them under each article, where people bring up other confirmed. I'm going to say that again, confirmed. Anybody could theorize and think the Queen of England is, made of cheese. We all know that's not true. But could you say the British government's been caught shipping narcotics? Yes, that's been declassified. And people said it at the time and got called conspiracy theorists. So Paul Watson joins us in this segment, the next, and that little 5-minute no man's land at the start of the next hour. Paul Watson, you've got the floor. I already talked about some of these earlier, but of the 20, what do you think's the most important?
One of the most interesting ones, Alex, is the first one in the second part of the series. The business plot, this fascist conspiracy to overthrow the US government, which of course occurred back in the 1930s. Prescott Bush and all these heads of big banks and corporations like Chase Bank, Goodyear, Standard Oil, DuPont family, they approached Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler with this plan to install a fascist dictatorship by force. They expected him to oversee it within the army. But he actually ended up blowing the whistle, exposing the plot to the United States House of Representatives Special Committee on Un-American Activities. What's interesting about it, though, from this perspective is, at the time, the New York Times said that it was, quote, a gigantic hoax that this plot ever existed. Turned out, actually, that the committee concluded that Butler's allegations were credible. So it was a very real plot, but at the time the media dismissed it as a gigantic hoax, as a conspiracy theory.
It really is incredible. And that's just one of the points that you bring up. The existence of the mafia, that was called a conspiracy theory until the mid-50s, because they were blackmailing some of the top FBI people. That later came out. That's in there. The FBI poisoned alcohol during Prohibition. Folks, we're not demonizing just the FBI. It's just these are well-known conspiracy theories that were reported at the time and denied as conspiracy theories. Paul, the sky is blue. They could call that a conspiracy theory, but it's not. 2 + 2 does equal 4.
What's interesting now, Alex, is that the main modern-day progenitor of conspiracy theories is the U.S. government itself. I mean, look at MH17 shoot now. For days after the event, they were asserting that it was shot down by Russian-backed rebels, failed to provide any hard evidence whatsoever. And in fact, we called for the release of the air traffic control tapes. Now, 5-6 weeks later, they are non-existent. So time and again with these major events that go to, prolonged wars, act as casus bellis for wars, for military expansion, the governments are the one progeniting the conspiracy theories because they never back up their claims with hardcore evidence. And you can go back to incubator babies, in Iraq, and weapons of mass destruction. You can go back to northwards. What's interesting from this perspective, I mean, we had Cass Sunstein come out, obviously, back in, I think it was 2008, with this cognitive infiltration idea. He proposed the need to have government agents infiltrate conspiracy theory forums and so forth in order to counter conspiracy theories about government corruption. But even in that program, he admitted that some conspiracy theories previously dismissed as insane and fringe have turned out to be entirely true. And he gave the examples of the CIA administering LSD in mind control experiments, the DOD plotting the commission of terrorist attacks inside the United States. So even Cass Sunstein, from his perspective of trying to dampen down and quash conspiracy theories, admitted that many of them are in fact true, as we document in these articles.
Let's continue. There's 20 of them in the two-part article, reposted at Infowars.com. But again, there's hundreds of other admitted conspiracies. Let's talk about some of the big ones that are on record.
The USS Liberty is a big one because, of course, Israel swore after they attacked this ship in 1967, killing 34 crew members during the Six-Day War. They swore that it was an error and that they had mistaken the ship for an Egyptian vessel. And of course, both Israeli and US government investigations accepted that version of events, and it stood for decades. But then in 2007, and you had a lot of these people on your show at the time, the declassified government documents came out, as well as the recollections of the former military personnel who were there at the time, where the NSA had intercepted the communications from the Israelis, proving that the Israelis knew they were attacking an American naval vessel. So again, another example of a conspiracy theory about Israel knowing that this was a US vessel. That was labeled, debunked as a conspiracy theory for decades, only came out really solidly. Of course, we'd had testimony before that, but only actually confirmed in 2007 that they knew it was a U.S. vessel.
That's right. They had members of the JAG Officer Corps, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, others went public, as well as some of the Israeli pilots. It's now admitted it was a false flag to blame it on Egypt. That's just a fact. Governments all over the place do this. Our government's done it. The Russians have done it. People need to stop being so naive. Governments stage things to be able to blame their enemies, period. And that conspiracy theory has been proven true, and it's linked in your article.
And then an even bigger one, of course, World War I, the sinking of the Lusitania. Of course, Germany put out an advisory before the Lusitania sailed, warning that they would target ships which they knew contained munitions.
They named the Lusitania. They named the Lusitania.
Exactly. And this conspiracy theory, as it was called at the time, was only proved in 2008 when the divers went down and discovered more than 4 million rounds of rifle ammunition hidden in cargo holds that were labeled, cheese, butter, and oysters. So when they actually went down and searched the wreckage, they found that, yes, indeed, the Lusitania was carrying all this munition, all these weapons, and that's why it was targeted by the Germans. Of course, that wasn't the story at the time. The story was that this was an unprovoked attack, and of course it was used to basically start World War I. So, again, a major, major incident that was labeled a conspiracy theory right up until 2008, when it was proven true that the Lusitania was indeed carrying those weapons.
So, conspiracy theories that were proven true coming up. Now, I'll tell you one conspiracy theory that isn't when we return on the other side. Because I'll tell you the real conspiracy theorists are on the other side. We are not. We're into fact here, ladies and gentlemen, and critical thinking, which is more and more outlawed.
I had tried everything. I'd cut back the amount of food I was eating. I was lifting weights and jogging, but nothing was working. My body was literally starving for minerals and trace elements as well as key vitamins. And as soon as I had that, I immediately could eat half of what I was eating previously and be satisfied. Now, there are hundreds of great products at InfoWarsTeam.com, but I want to point out the 3 that have helped me lose 37 pounds in just 2 months. Products like Beyond Tangy Tangerine, Pollen Burst, and Rebound. When I started taking the Tangy Tangerine and other products every day, I lost more than 37 pounds in just 2 months. Now that's results. I want to challenge my listeners to go to InfoWarsTeam.com and to order just 3 of their products, and you will see the changes in the way you look, feel, and in your appetite almost immediately. Start your journey to health and wellness today. InfoWarsTeam.com.
Paul Watson joins us from London, England. I come to you from deep in the heart of Texas, Austin. A beautiful, wonderful city that my ancestors have been in for a long time. Now overrun by socialists from California who are trying to ban guns and stuff. Not against Californians. You've already collapsed much of your beautiful state. Now you're here It doesn't matter. It's what you do. Side issue. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's my opinion, which you're not allowed to have. They call that a theory. You're not allowed to have your own opinion. That's what all this conspiracy theory labeling is about. And that's linked in Paul's article and my article. In the second article, dealing with the fact that the CIA said, call anyone questioning corruption a conspiracy theorist just to shut down debate. Basically like calling you a heretic. Now, let me give you some real conspiracy theories that are total baloney. In fact, we should come out with an article next week, Paul, on 10 government conspiracy theories that were total bull. And, of course, that would be Al Gore inventing the Internet. When the Internet was invented by DARPA back in the 60s inside the CIA and government facilities and universities. That's on record, too. 2 + 2 = 5 in Common Core. That is a total delusional conspiracy theory. They teach kids that under Common Core to literally screw up their minds. If you're a corrupt government that tells you that you didn't build your business and that raising the debt ceiling doesn't raise the debt, as Obama famously said, well, you know, then you've got to teach people that 2 + 2 = 5. So there's some conspiracy theories that are total baloney. Carbon dioxide causes global warming. All the major studies show that carbon dioxide goes up after warming because there's more life on the planet, more plant life. But that doesn't matter. I mean, ignore that. Just call us the climate deniers. Paul Watson, let's get into some of the other conspiracy theories that turned out to be true in the 2 articles that are on Infowars.com.
Yeah, well, obviously, the major one used as a casus belli for war was the Gulf of Tonkin. Of course, we were told that the USS Maddox was attacked by the North Vietnamese. Never happened. The attack never took place. It was used to start the Vietnam War and that whole disaster. And then again in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we had Operation Gladio, which was where NATO stay-behind teams carried out terrorist attacks to demonize leftist political groups in Europe as terrorists. So the main example would be the Bologna train station bombing in 1980, which killed 85 people. Blamed on the Red Brigades, eventually turned out that the Italian Secret Service was responsible for the attack. And of course, again, that was a conspiracy theory that Gladio was about a NATO false flag terror operation for decades, until it came out in parliamentary investigations from eyewitnesses, from whistleblowers, that was precisely what was taking place. It was a state carrying out terrorist attacks to demonize political groups which were seen at the time as a threat to the power system. The Gleiwitz incident, which we saw almost a replay of last week, where Russia accused Ukraine of staging the incident where Russia made the incursion with the so-called military convoy onto Ukrainian territory. Ukraine claimed they destroyed the convoy. Russia came out immediately after and said that they could have even killed their own people just to stage this incident, or it never happened at all. And that's similar to the Gleiwitz incident in 1939, where 9 days before the incident, Hitler said, quote, "I will provide a propagandistic casus belli. Its credibility doesn't matter. The victor will not be asked whether he told the truth." And that was 9 days before German operatives dressed in Polish military uniforms seized this radio station near the Polish border in Germany, beforehand broadcasting a propaganda message in Polish to make it look as if the Poles had carried out the attack. The very next day, Germany invaded Poland, with Hitler citing that very incident as one of its pretexts. So again, many of these conspiracy theories that turned out to be true are major incidents that lead to wars, lead to invasions of foreign countries.
And, of course, Gleiwitz was part of the overall Operation Himmler, is declassified, is public, and early on in World War II, the Nazis denied it and said that it was made up and a hoax, that they had staged those events. They even dressed up prisoners in Polish uniforms and shot them to have dead bodies on the newsreels that people would go see movies and watch news before the age of television. So this just goes on and on and on. Let's cover some more of the admitted conspiracy theories that turn out to be true, like people claiming there was organized crime with the Italians, and imagine the FBI saying it didn't exist until the mid-50s. I mean, that's like saying, again, the Atlantic Ocean doesn't exist. We now know there's organized crime in every ethnic group. Imagine how naive the public was to believe the FBI that it didn't exist.
Precisely, and then there are a couple of more involved in the FBI. You mentioned at the top of the show, the FBI poisoned alcohol during Prohibition because, of course, it was virtually impossible to enforce these ridiculous laws. So they attempted to do it in a way which basically killed people. I mean, there are all kinds of conspiracy theories, so-called by the media, which are proven about the government meddling with food and water supply, the environment. Back in the 1920s, during Prohibition, the FBI enforced the law by deliberately poisoning alcohol with things like methane, formaldehyde, ammonia, arsenic, and kerosene. They even added rubbing alcohol, which is made of water and propene, basically destroys your internal organs. They also added paint thinner. So an example of how the government deliberately poisoned people in order to enforce the law. Of course, another one is the FBI crime lab cover-up. This emerged back in the early 90s from Dr. Frederick Whitehurst, one of the FBI's top scientists, and a whistleblower on how the FBI would deliberately manipulate crime lab data in order to sway trials and frame innocent people. So there are hundreds or even thousands of people innocent but sent to jail as a result of this crime lab data being manipulated. And then it only came out in 2012 that the Justice Department had been, quote, withholding information for years about these cases. So again, it was denied for almost 2 decades.
Just like they denied giving people syphilis in Tuskegee, that's in there. What about the Clintons and the vast right-wing conspiracy? They've now released a few months ago, as you have in the article, from the Clinton Library, that indeed they were working with the mainstream media to demonize anyone questioning corruption. And they said in there, because we don't want a new independent press to rise, we have to discredit the idea of a citizen press.
Precisely. It was part of the war on new media, which at the time, of course, was mainly centered around Matt Drudge and to a lesser extent WorldNet Daily. But they had this deliberate policy. Hillary invented the pejorative term vast right-wing conspiracy to demonize the new media as not being credible, being kooky. And they had a deliberate policy to stop these stories that were coming out from the likes of Drudge from being picked up by the, quote, mainstream media. So exactly, it was a deliberate attempt to control the media via their operatives in the media, just like Operation Mockingbird.
And by the way, if folks simply go to Infowars.com right now, you can read these articles, follow the links to the Clinton Library documents. We're not just saying this here like mainstream media does, where they just make claims and don't show proof. We're showing you the proof. What about geoengineering? That's one we should end on, Paul.
Yeah, that's the final one in the second article. Of course, for years throughout the 90s, people were pointing to evidence of these geoengineering projects taking place, of course, linked to the phenomena of chemtrails and atmospheric manipulation. But we only actually really got the hardcore documents in the latter years of the previous decade, around 2008, 2009, where the government is indeed conducting these large-scale indirect, semi-direct aerosol campaign spraying programs where they're basically spraying artificial chemicals in the air for tests on weather manipulation and so forth. And they admit it in their own documents, which are now public and on the internet. Before that, it was a conspiracy theory that the government was manipulating the weather. Of course, now we know that that's way, way in advance of anything we ever knew about. It's way in advance of cloud seeding, weather weapons, which Ben Livingston was talking about in the 60s. That's all
exactly. And in closing, we're going to come back with 5 more minutes with you, Paul, but the big problem is then they have total kooks out there that claim that every contrail is a weather manipulation. That then discredits all the real research. And then folks don't look into what's admitted, because it's not called chemtrails in the government documents. It's called geoengineering, basically terraforming, and Bill Gates and others are involved. Follow the links to government documents and admissions at Infowars.com. 10 conspiracy theories that came true when questioning the official narrative proves crucial. And part 2, 10 more conspiracy theories that came true. From a fascist coup d'etat to the FBI poisoning alcohol. It's all documented at PrisonPlanet.com and Infowars.com. Paul, I want want to spend this little 5-minute segment ahead of Larry Klayman coming on. I want to spend this little 5-minute segment getting your take on it, because I see you getting frustrated in your news videos, your nightly news reports, with the folks that don't do any research but just wildly throw out whatever conjecture is, and then we get lumped in with those people. But it's worse than that. They then get mad at us when we don't agree with everything they're saying or doing. I think we should all just question everything, go off research, go off what's been proven as accurate sources, and historical perspectives. Humans do the same stuff over and over again. I mean, InfoWars is not really about theorizing. 90+% of what we do is just cover what's already known. It's just so fantastical. Truth is stranger than fiction. A lot of people can't deal with it. But, I mean, what do you think about this whole term conspiracy theory? Because for me, it just means someone who questions known liars. Within that compendium, or that spectrum, though, of completely kooky stuff on one end and government propaganda on the other, I see myself as in the middle, a true moderate trying to discover the human experience. What is truth? I mean, I think that's the great aspiration in life. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, people are poisoning the well from my perspective. I mean, I look at it from a perspective of motive, like the ISIS beheading of James Foley. That clearly had a motive to justify military expansion in the Middle East and a potential attack on Syria, which they couldn't get done last year because another of their conspiracy theories failed with the chemical weapons attack. But that had a clear motive, so I questioned it. Turned out we were proven right by the experts who analyzed it, said it was staged.
That's the experts to the British government say it's fake.
Exactly. They work with the British police. Then you have something like, you know, the death of Paul Walker. This is a Hollywood actor who wasn't even political. My problem with it is every time somebody in Hollywood dies, like Robin Williams or Paul Walker, people immediately say, oh, he was assassinated by the Illuminati.
Sure. Well, I mean, you're talking about the schizophrenics that say that I'm Jeff Bridges and, what's his name, Bill Hicks.
Yeah, it's a noisy minority. Thankfully, it's still a minority.
Well, really, it's entertaining. I mean, I got to be honest with you, and you do it too. I call them and say, what's the latest? I don't do this anymore. I swore it off 5 years ago. I've really cut back. We used to call up swapping the worst attack videos on us as entertainment. And the hater videos, I repented to God, though, that I love hater videos, because it's just, they're so sick and pathetic. It was a form of narcissism that I was enjoying it. But I mean, it's amazing, the phenomenon of schizophrenics now having access to YouTube and all their fantastical stuff. What must it be like for them, though, as all this real stuff goes on? That must be really freaking them out.
Well, that's precisely the frustration, isn't it? There are so many real cover-ups, real conspiracies taking place right now, and they're focusing on the death of some, actor in Hollywood that drove his car at high speed. It just doesn't interest me when there are so many real hardcore issues that you can dig into.
And remember, we got blamed for Paul Walker saying that it was a missile when you had a video debunking it.
Yeah, I put debunked in the headline, and people still say, how dare you say this was a conspiracy, because they don't watch the video. That's the problem most of the time.
Well, part of it is the dumbed down nature. I mean, the public is so dumbed down. I mean, they are so dumbed down. It is so sad, Paul.
It's sad, but, with the internet, democratization of information, we've got such a wide range of access to everything now that. But then again, we've got a lot of noise, so it's about picking and choosing what's credible and what's not. And I think that's the balance that we try to get.
Sure, and that's why they spend all day in the mainstream media and other places saying we're not credible. Well, we're incredibly credible. We're having a huge effect. We're growing exponentially. We try to tell the truth. People know that. And they know we're really looking for the truth, looking for justice. That's where we stand. And we're not with the government conspiracy theorists or the poor mentally ill people out there. But look, the government has lied so much, I don't blame folks for believing nothing. Even stupid people know they're being lied to, so they come up with stupid theories, but at least they're trying to think. Paul Watson, thanks for the time. Great job with the articles.
Thanks, Alex.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.